Well, we have remarkable heat that took place in this country this past Friday, January 26th. It took place in the mid-Atlantic area as temperatures went into the low 80s in Washington, D.C. This is something that's totally phenomenal. Just to explain how incredible this is, you have to realize Phoenix, Arizona's max temperature so far this year, as of Friday, January 26, 2024, 77 degrees. In fact, all of these cities on the Gulf Coast, maximum temperatures, with the exception of South Florida, have all been in the 70s. So Washington, D.C. is the winner. If you exclude South Florida, Washington, D.C., Friday afternoon, temperature hits 80 degrees. That's the winner for the country right now for this year. But it gets even better than that. The hottest temperature ever recorded for the month of January, going all the way back from when records started back in 1872 for Washington, D.C., was 79 degrees as of Thursday, January 25th, 2024. We broke that record on Friday, January 26th, as the temperature hit 80 degrees for the very first time in the month of January. The rest of the mid-Atlantic area also saw close to record warmth or record heat. Baltimore, Maryland, the official high, 78 degrees. The record over there was also 79 degrees. So close, but not quite. That warmth is making itself well known. In fact, there's no greater temperature to hit to make yourself well known than to hit 80 degrees without being super extreme. 90 degrees just is totally out of the question right now. But there is a difference between 80 degrees and 79 degrees. Besides the fact 80 degrees is the hottest temperature for January ever recorded. But in addition to that, you do get to have headlines with temperatures in the low 80s. One of the reasons why temperatures get so warm sometimes this time of the year is when the jet stream buckles. It buckles any time of the year, but if you get the jet stream to buckle or get some type of a block, something like that, you have the sun out, temperatures can get pretty warm, and that's what's been happening over some parts of the world. In Spain, we also had the hottest temperature ever recorded for the month of January. Also, Friday, January 26th, I believe, is the temperature hit 29 degrees Celsius, 84 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the temperature. This is swimming weather. In Spain, even in the mid-Atlantic area, it's close to swimming weather. In fact, dew points were also in the mid-60s. It's been reported that earlier in the day, dew points were in the mid-60s. Unless you lived right off of a cold body of water, the dew points were summer-like in the mid-60s. In the end of January, in Baltimore, in the mid-Atlantic area. That's what the dew points were. Temperature, again, low 80s. Very intense stuff for this time of the year. Now, let's just take a look at something that took place a week ago on Friday, as 2 to 4 inches of snow spread across the mid-Atlantic area. In fact, some areas got 5 inches. We even had an area that got just about 6 inches of snow. There's a different episode that I made, which may or may not get put on here. It's a little bit of a different style, has tons of details, lots of it goes through many cities with the exact snowfall accumulations. We'll put it on, but that's for the mid-Atlantic area. 2 snowstorms in 1 week, the first time that's happened since 2010. Although in 2015 there were back-to-back blizzards, and to figure out the difference between the two, we would also be listening to that episode. We saw about 2 to 4 inches of snow for each system. Some saw about 4.1 inches, system number 1, I believe that was Washington, D.C., and we saw a little bit less by system number 2. So this is significant stuff, especially when you consider the fact that they have not seen significant snow for over 700 days in that area. So we finally get snow over there, and then a week later, the temperatures hit a balmy low 80s, in Washington, D.C. It's very easy to appreciate. Those of us living here in the Midwest who live in the mid-latitudes can easily appreciate what an 80-degree warmth is in the month of January. It's something which is really unheard of. Those living in different countries have a difficult time appreciating it because you're not familiar with what the climate is here, just like it is a little bit difficult to understand how warm 84 degrees is in the country Spain in January. We also saw record warmth in France, record warmth in Germany. Switzerland as well had record warmth. Some of these places saw the warmest minimal temperatures ever recorded for this month, but that's due to the urban heat island effect, or it certainly could be. But when you're talking about daytime highs, that's really not connected to the urban heat island effect. The reason for that is due to mixing that occurs usually during the day. You have some air aloft that mixes down to the surface. So those warmer temperatures that occur downtown in the morning, it doesn't last through the day. You don't really hear about it during the day. You'll hear high temperatures, low 90s, lows tonight, mid 60s in the suburbs, low 70s in the city. This is a nighttime routine, especially in the wintertime. The urban heat island effect takes control. The question is, the record warmth during the days, what do we attribute it to? So we mentioned blocking patterns could produce warm temperatures well above normal temperatures, especially in the summertime. This particular situation, we had high pressure. When you go over to Spain, we had high pressure going many miles up into the atmosphere. That's something called a heat dome. Those things have compressional warming to them, and as a result, the temperatures get even warmer than what they ordinarily would be. So that's why we have such warm temperatures, at least unseasonably warm. That would explain temperatures going into the 70s. Probably does not explain the full story. For a temperature to hit 80 degrees, why was it 1 degree warmer than what it usually is? So, it explains why it would be really warm. But 80 degrees, there's other explanations as well. It happens to be there are those that say that the El Nino, not those that say the El Nino is contributing to the warmth this year. But there are those that say also the warmer ocean water temperatures, which is left over from last year, and we still don't have much ice in the water at all. So we're still dealing with that. Once the ice forms, especially here in the Great Lakes, so then we have recovered basically from the warmer waters of last year. But the Gulf of Mexico, we're not going to be dealing with any ice. We have a storm system that's going to be developing off in the Pacific. Unseasonably warm temperatures ahead of this storm produced record heat in the state of Oregon. Sunday, Monday, tomorrow, another day of record heat for the state of Oregon and nearby portions. When the storm system finally does move on, we're talking about very significant rain. Very significant rain. We also had a winter storm of up to 17 inches of snow over in the New England area that's pulling away as we speak. So the double-digit snowfall accumulations up in the New England area. 36 to 50 inches of snow by Tuesday morning is what's expected for the northeast Prince William Sound, Valdez, Alaska, up in the also Thompson Pass. An avalanche warning is in effect for that area. Super dangerous stuff. Very high risk for avalanche. People follow the National Weather Service advice in regards to where you should be going and where you should not be going. An avalanche is very, very dangerous. We also have reports of 85 mile per hour wind gusts on the top of the higher elevations of Hawaii, causing doors. The National Weather Service says that doors are slamming open and slamming shut, which, due to these 85 mile per hour wind gusts, this was as of yesterday, which could cause some damage for people who are not careful. It's usually we don't hear things about doors. We hear other types of dangers associated with high winds. So we have some very interesting stuff. Doors is not something that we usually hear about. It's almost, you could even envision almost a humorous situation if you were able to eliminate the danger. But there is a danger involved over here. So we go now. Go and look at a storm system that will be developing later this week in the South Texas area. The storm system moves across the Gulf Coast, bringing tons of rain. we should actually focus more on what already has happened. Texas, over the weekend, over the past several days, there are cities in Texas that saw tropical storm rain equivalent, 16 inches of rain. Many of those Gulf Coast states saw 10 inches of rain. We had some areas that got 8 inches of rain. All these different states along the Gulf Coast, just very intense rainfall, and I believe Tennessee is included in this. We have not had an episode since the Arctic blast, which brought historic cold to Tennessee, historic winter conditions to places. Tennessee really was singled out in many different variables, if not the temperature, consecutive days of significant snow on the ground, stuff that has not occurred in many, many years. The Washington Post has more details regarding this. And the Washington Post really does a phenomenal job at weather-related articles and really covering, especially they cover many national weather services, and the Arctic outbreak of a week and 2 weeks ago is covered well, especially for the state of Tennessee. Lots of stuff occurred. This is for the south central states where heavy snow occurred. You know, the Chicago area, with those two snowstorms, with all the inaccuracies, but when all is said and done, the official amounts were between 3 and 6 inches for each of those two storms. Chicago has quite a reputation. Southern stream storms produce 3 to 6 inches. That's the way it goes, whether you saw it on the ground or not, but the official reporting station, the way they measure it, there was 3 to 6 inches of snow. Moving right along over here, we want to point out that back then we were mentioning, due to the European computer model, something which really the National Weather Service was at the very beginning stages of mentioning, is that the drought for Baltimore would be broken, that snow drought, and it amazingly actually did materialize, as we just spoke about, and we even did have an area that got very close to 6 inches of snow. Of course, when you include the two storms together, you end up getting more than that. Moving on to Australia, we have record heat occurring in the south, really the southwest portions of Australia. 119 degrees was recorded there last week. This exceptional warmth goes all the way up into northern Asia and is covering portions of Japan as well. A ridge will be developing this week in Canada and the northern plains, bringing temperatures about 30 degrees above normal for the end part of this week, the middle to latter parts of this week. And then we have some questions as to what's actually going to be happening from the weekend onward for next week. Storm system, as we mentioned, will be developing, moving across the Gulf Coast, bringing rain. It looks like the storm system as of now will be taking a southern track, even far enough south to avoid significant severe weather. That severe weather would remain even further south than land, really, than the states. And then that storm system, well, what's it going to do once it hits off the coast of Florida? Is it going to move up the coast or have any type of coastal impact at all? It doesn't look like there's enough cold air for snow at this point for next week, at least not for most locations. The one thing that will be very interesting, however, is you have these northeast winds that develop, like in a city like Chicago. When you get these storm systems off on the East Coast, it causes northeast winds, and this time of the year, the northeast winds are going to be cold. They blow over the relatively warm water of Lake Michigan, which is located to the northeast of Chicago. That is the scenario, basically the one and only scenario that could really bring significant lake effect snow to Chicago. Chicago does not really get significant lake effect snow. I believe the most lake effect snow ever recorded in a storm officially is only 5.8 inches. You know, the places that actually get the snow, we're talking about feet and feet and feet of snow, some places over 100 inches in just one storm. That's when the lake is located to the west of the city. So the cold winds, they blow in from the west or the north, but Chicago is located the lake is to the east. So to get a northeast cold wind is something which is unique, and it doesn't usually occur. We get lake enhancement, which is not as significant as lake effect snow. The last time we had a lake effect snow event was at the very end of January 2022. The officially 3.3 inches fell at O'Hare Airport, but accumulations between 8 and 9 inches were reported in Skokie and Evanston. Last night, the European computer model set the city up for this upcoming Tuesday, a week from tomorrow into tomorrow night and Wednesday for a lake effect snow event. Although accumulations, according to the European computer model, only an inch, but lake effect snow is not really so forecastable even 24 hours in advance, let alone a week in advance. However, the synaptic weather setup is forecastable, and you have that storm going through the Gulf Coast, but that's as far as we really know right now. Today, when you look at the map, really, for Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, this is maybe 8-9 days out, you do see the northeast winds coming off of the lake, but for some reason, the precipitation is no longer showing up. So, but that would be a pattern that could, in theory, bring lake effect snow into the area either a week from tomorrow or on Wednesday. We currently are right now holding in the evening of Monday, January 29th, 2024. And, there's been so much that's gone on over the past couple of weeks but we've covered a lot right now. So we covered rain accumulations equivalent to basically a tropical storm. We covered this two systems that occurred over in the mid-Atlantic area, each one bringing a little bit more snow than what was forecasted, and bringing an end to that 700-day, more than 700-day snow drought. We also should mention that many of the schools closed in Washington, D.C. Perhaps the same was true for Baltimore as well. One thing we didn't mention, although we did mention the 80-degree warmth that occurred in Washington, D.C., 78 degrees in Baltimore, we should mention that downslope winds just to the west of Baltimore sometimes is responsible for the heat, the warmth. The intensified warmth in that area sometimes is due to the mountain range located just to the west of that area. The winds blow down those mountains and they warm. That's, again, compressional warming, and that produces an increase in those temperatures. I don't know if that's what happened over here or not, but someone would have to come up with a good explanation for why Washington, D.C. is the winner right now, even more than Phoenix, at least from looking back at last Friday, January 26th. It's the only city, again, except for South Florida, that hit 80 degrees. We also have something similar in the St. Louis, Missouri area, which was forecasted to occur this week. I don't know if it did or not, but winds blowing down slope of the Ozark Plateau, which is a little bit of a mountain range located just to the southwest of the St. Louis area. Southwest winds bring in, that's the warmest wind possible, usually, and that's where the Ozark Plateau is. So you get a lot of times the St. Louis area sees temperatures significantly warmer than areas right around there. The actual language of the National Weather Service this time around was orographic, I think, or that's just explaining the whole situation of the precipitation going up the mountain and then the warm, dry air coming back down. But it's really the downslope winds that produces the warmer and drier air that is responsible for the increase in the warmth a lot of times in that part of the area. Okay, we are going into an El Nino weather pattern once again. The January thaw, which the New York Times tells us happens many, many years, almost every year. It occurs, they have an exact date for it, January 23rd to January 27th. It occurred this year right on time. It brought an end to the Arctic outbreak, and we go back to the El Nino weather pattern. El Nino weather pattern is when the southern stream is active, and that's what we have. Another storm system, it just moves along the Gulf Coast, goes out there, and then things are dry up north. The Arctic air becomes blocked off. This is classic El Nino weather pattern. That's what we're in for the next week at least. And, we have that storm system moving perhaps somewhat up the coast next week. The mid-Atlantic area a lot of times sees above normal snowfall during an El Nino year. This is especially true as we go into the second half of winter due to the warmer ocean water temperatures could have indirectly an effect on the jet stream and directly an effect on the precipitation and falling as rain for the first half of the winter. So many years they do have an above normal snowfall. Also, in the Amarillo, Texas, the southern plains, that area also tends to get above normal snowfall. We've seen a number of storms where the precipitation fell as snow due to dynamic cooling. I know there's stuff that we have not covered, but it's not coming to mind at the moment. The details of everything we have not covered, but we've mentioned the general categories, the main events, and the countries in which they are occurring. Some of the details are available on a different episode, which might get put on at maybe today. I wish everybody a wonderful night. Stay safe and enjoy. Where are we? Stay safe. Enjoy the mild weather that we have. We should just mention that there are 2 Clipper systems coming through the Chicago area this week. Each one has an associated front. The last I checked, the temperatures were not cold enough for the precipitation to fall as snow. Clipper systems a lot of times could be intense storm systems, but they're moisture starved and they're quick moving. But this time around, the North Carolina National Weather Service worded it as a strong storm system will dive into that area. We have a moisture-starved system over here, but moisture falls nonetheless. Precipitation is unique to fall as rain in the winter, but that's what is forecasted to happen for the first half. Snow might mix in for the second half, but either way, no snowfall accumulation is expected. If there really isn't any significant snow or any systems really in sight for the Chicago area. But again, just if you're really looking for something, we can go back to last night where the European computer model for next to a week from tomorrow night into Wednesday did show a lake effect snow event getting set up over the Chicago area. And again, right now, the European computer model continues to show a northeast wind, a cold northeast wind blowing over the lake, but it no longer shows any snowfall for some reason, and I do not know why. I just want to add one more thing, going back to the warmth in Washington, D.C., and also the warmth in Spain and in many of the countries over there with the record heat. It's worth mentioning that the Washington Post does a thorough job in explaining how these things are happening. It also explains the impact that greenhouse gases could be having on all of this. There's especially an article written in the Washington Post last spring, which also explains the possible impacts the greenhouse gases have on the jet stream. The jet stream is the main driving force of weather, especially here in the United States, but also in the mid-latitudes. So that's going to be a major thing over here. If there's not 100% agreement on the impact that greenhouse gases has on the jet stream, so then the impacts that it has is not 100% agreed upon. But the Washington Post does go through that. It goes through it always does, but especially last spring, there was some articles about that. We also have, even outside the Washington Post, there are plenty of theories that not theories. I mean, greenhouse, it's very reasonable to assume, says meteorologist Bill Mass. He's in the Northwest Pacific. His expertise is in that area. He also has a podcast. He says that it's reasonable to believe that greenhouse gases could be increasing temperatures by 1 or 2 degrees during these record-breaking heat waves, which would include the Spain heat dome. I do not know if the Washington, D.C., if that was part of a heat dome or not, but nonetheless, you could contribute you could attribute perhaps a degree or so to that, but I refer you to the climatologists, and the Washington Post seems to do a good job at that. I wish everybody a wonderful night. Stay safe, and thank you for your interest.